Namaste, and thank you for joining me tonight. It's actually morning in India. I am halfway across the world, and in a sense, using the support of technology, we are bridging differences of time and space and connecting at the level of something more essential in consciousness. It's as if time and space don't matter. The first question is, I have always been curious to know how we know consciousness is evolving. There are two sides to the evolution of consciousness. One is that we begin to see and feel things differently. The same world which we are experiencing as human beings is experienced differently by animals, by the monkey, or by the ant. And it's not just the senses, it's also the way we register consciousness. And there's a second side which is more subtle, which is the quality and grade of cognition which is involved in experiencing the world. A newborn baby has a certain sense of reality where rationality is not so strong. But as an adult, we have as if moved into a rational domain of existence, and that's a new grade of consciousness emerging. But there are gradations still higher than rationality, gradations where you have spontaneous experience of the knowledge behind the form. And form is only a means to reach out to a deeper knowing. And these are experiences which we normally consider to be belonging to a domain of mysticism or spirituality, but they are in fact potentially accessible to all of us at any point, wherever we are. And that shift is taking place also more frequently. Just as an example, we will notice that children today are far more conscious of themselves, of the world, and often have a different kind of way of thinking than we were at their age. And that's a sign of a general collective evolution. So there's a difference between the collective evolution in humanity, of which we do not have a direct control, and then there is the individual evolution of consciousness, which we can speed up consciously. The next question is, can you say more about the so-called shifting that is purported to be happening, such as the 2012 as a turning point? Is this a way of describing a phenomenon of more individuals coming into higher consciousness? These are dates which have been presented to us from some context. Many traditions have various kinds of systems of measuring rhythms and cycles of development. But what we have to understand is that evolution does not take place automatically because of certain dates. Evolution does not involve a jump from one level to another. There is always a gradual unfolding out of the current state. And that transition, to a great extent, depends on us. So 2012 will neither be end of the world nor a sudden transformation of the world. It'll be just another beautiful day. But if we think it is going to be important and we make it important for us by making an effort to change, then there will be a change. But if we wait for a change to happen, then probably nothing will happen. So what is more important is for us to recognize, irrespective of dates, that this is a period of transition where great opportunities for growth are given to us through a complex pressure of circumstances and challenges, but also a kind of an evolutionary urge that we all feel within us individually and collectively. And if at that point we can align ourselves to that evolutionary urge, it can carry us rapidly and we can make a rapid growth if we so choose to align. And that's, for me, much more important than a specific date. There is another question. Do you think what we experience as déjà vu and reincarnation could actually be universal consciousness instead? When we speak of universal consciousness, we mean here something which includes and encompasses all experience of consciousness. In a sense, all our individual conscious experiences can be said to be part of a single totality of all experience, and they're all taking place within that single totality. From the same perspective, one can also say that single totality is immanent and present in all our individual experiences. That's what we mean by universal consciousness. And so you can say, yes, every experience is part of universal consciousness, but déjà vu and reincarnation represent a kind of a portion of that, in the sense that in déjà vu, there is a part of my consciousness which is able to perceive an emerging possibility and is able to experience that as already happening before it takes place on another part of my consciousness. Because consciousness is not just a monotone, flat reality. It is a multifaceted, even multi-graded domain of experience, although the essential consciousness is one. So déjà vu and reincarnation represent particular lines of experience within universality. The next question is, what is the first step in awakening to this essential consciousness? I think the first step would be to step back, to disengage from our hypnosis with the phenomenon of the senses and a reality outside us. We are so locked into this experience of the world around, which is not I, that we have forgotten that there is somebody who is experiencing the world, who is not the forms of the world that we see, who is not the senses, but who is aware of the senses, who is aware of the world. And a stepping back to disengage from the senses, turning upon one's own awareness, is the single first step. Subsequently, there are several possible, so to say, dimensions of exploration possible. One could, for example, pursue that sense of awareness. What is the essence of my sense of being aware? And go back into it as if deepening, going into some kind of an essential sense of aware. And this was the great question which Ramana Maharshi, the great sage of modern India, spoke of when someone asked him a philosophical question. Yes, sometimes he also answered, but more often he said, ask yourself who is asking the question. And this turn of consciousness to where did this question come from? Why am I curious? Where does this curiosity itself emerge? Where does the question emerge? Takes me back to essential awareness. And all the way back, there are gradations even there. There can be a status of mental self-awareness, the self in mind, as we call it in the yogic tradition, which can be a kind of experience of liberation and, as some people call it, enlightenment, but it's not yet the highest. One has to go further into the most essential self, in which you experience a timelessness, a spacelessness, and a transcendence of time and space, which includes the entire cosmos in itself. And that's when you're closer to the most essential consciousness. There are other directions possible, such as turning upwards to a sense of something vast, transcending above, into which this little consciousness of my awareness is as if subsumed, of which it is a part and projection. And so there are various possibilities of exploration, but eventually they all lead through different directions back to the same essential, because there is only one source. The next question, does one need to have a guru or teacher to help discover essential consciousness? And I'll take your question literally. One does not need to have a teacher or guru, but certainly a teacher or guru can be a great help. Because ultimately, as it is said in the yogic tradition in India, the only teacher and guru is the divine himself. That one essential consciousness is your teacher, because it is that which is immanent within you. It is in that that your own journey takes place, and that can be the greatest help. But sometimes, because we are so fixated on the world of forms and our externalized sense of phenomena, that it helps when someone outside me can help point the way to that inside me. So in the Indian yogic tradition, it is said, the role of the true teacher, the true guru, is to put you in touch with that essential divine consciousness. After that, the journey is led directly by that. So, yes, it is a help, but it is not necessary to have a guru or teacher. The next question, is it okay to strive even if it be striving to raise consciousness? Is that not a subtle resistance to what already is? Yes, it's an interesting point. When we make an effort, for example, you make an effort to silence your mind, the very effort is an agitation which often increases the activity of the mind. And sometimes the effort to silence the mind should be to let go of effort. It sounds contradictory, but when you try to do it, it's very practical, it's very rational, and not at all paradoxical. So, yes, there are different kinds of effort. There is the striving effort of attention, and then there is the letting go effort of resting back. In fact, disengaging from all the conditionings to slide back to the essential experience of my own awareness, for example, or to lean back into a sense of an stillness and peace. And that also is an effort in a certain sense, but different kind of effort. So once you distinguish that there are different kinds of effort, I think the problem is resolved. But I will use another word instead of effort, which is at the heart of the effort itself and makes for its success or failure. And that word is aspiration. Aspiration, different from effort. Aspiration is the turn of consciousness towards that which you seek. Seeking, but without agitation. And the very fact that the flower turns to the sun and opens to the sunlight fills it. That's how aspiration works. There is no other effort except the turning and opening of oneself to the reality which you seek, because the reality is already there. And by your opening to it, you give a chance for it to settle into you and reveal itself to you. So at the heart of any successful effort is this principle of aspiration. The next question is, can you prepare yourself for direct experience? And the question after that, is there any danger in experiencing essential consciousness? I'll combine the two. Well, in the journey, a preparation is a great help. But a lot depends on what it is you are seeking to realize. For some, it is simply to realize my true sense of identity, and it stops there. For others, it is an essential consciousness which they want to go to. For some, it is a cosmic experience of that essential consciousness. And there are many ways of approaching it. Depending on the kind of approach, you may prepare yourself differently. But a common element of all preparation is to train our consciousness to become quiet, to become still, and to turn inward or upward to the sense of that source. Once that preparation is established, the opening to the experience becomes so much more easy or natural. If that preparation is not there, suppose my consciousness is agitated and has a lot of internal contradictions, then a part of my consciousness would enter or touch that experience. The other parts may enter in conflict with it, and it may cause internal distress and an internal split, so to say. And that's a kind of a danger in experiencing essential consciousness before sufficient preparation or purification has been made. So in practice, this is how it works. You start with a basic preparation. As you approach the experience, you allow the experience itself to mold you and prepare you as the container to hold it. In a sense, we are approaching, when we approach essential consciousness, we are approaching the infinite and the all potential. And if we are finite, then the infinite entering the finite too soon may shatter the finite bowl, so to say. But if we allow the infinite to plastify and shape